Hello, dear students, and welcome to our story, A Fresh Idea. Let's start with the genre of the story. The genre of the story is the realistic fiction. Realistic fiction tells about characters, settings, and events that are like people, places, and events in real life. We said that realistic fiction is something that didn't really happen, but it might happen. Why? Because it doesn't include fictional things like people who come from other planets, people who can fly, and these things. Now, the vocabulary words in this story, let's remember them: afford, loan, profit, prosper, risk, savings, scarce, and wages. Let's start with the first word, which is afford. If you can afford something, so you have money, you have enough money to pay for it. Name something that you would like to be able to afford. Think about a video game or a bicycle, a scooter, any toy, anything. Now, loan. A loan is money borrowed. Name one item that you might loan to a good friend. Let's let's say that if your friend doesn't have a pencil, doesn't have a sharpener or a pen or anything, so if you have an extra one, so you can borrow him. So it's considered as a loan. So loan is not only giving money to people and give them back later, but also can be used for items. Profit. The profit is the amount of money left after all businesses' costs have been paid. Or we can say, in other words, it's this difference between the the price that cost you buying something and the price that you sold something else. Let's imagine that you buy something for 20 reals and you sold it for 30 reals, let's say. So the difference is 10 reals, which is the profit that you gained. And now, why do you think profit is important to businesses? Of course, because we cannot imagine a business without profits, because businesses are based on profits. Prosper, when you prosper, you do well and become successful. So when your business grows up fast and succeeds, so you can say that your business prospers. Risk. Risk is the chance of loss or harm. Let's say risk in business when you are not sure that your work will prosper, but you take this risk. But here you might lose everything or you might earn a lot of money. Or in general, let's name two jobs that require people to take risk. We can imagine the firefighters when saving people's lives. They take this risk. Now, savings is money set aside for the future. If your parents are giving you money every day, so you don't use all of this money in buying things you like, but you save some of them. So this is called savings. And at the end of the week or at the end of the month, you will get good amount of money that you have saved. And what would you do with some savings? You might buy something like a game, or what about PlayStation 5? Oh my God. Okay. Now, scarce, when something is scarce, it is difficult to be got or found. Let's imagine the deserts. Can we easily find water in the deserts? Of course we can't. So we can say that water is scarce in the desert. Now, wages, payment received for work done. When someone finishes his work or finishes something that he is supposed to do, he receives wages or payments, money for doing this work. And now let's think of the needs. in this web for not only people, but also all living things need certain things in order to survive. Here are four main needs for all living things like food, water, shelter, and warmth. A fresh idea. So let's start our story now. One bright Saturday morning, Mally and her mom walked around the neighborhood. That is, her mom walked, but Mally ran, skipped, jumped over puddles, and visited the neighbor's dogs. Mally paused to look at the budding trees on her block. I can't wait until summer, she said, especially for Mrs. Fur's great tomatoes at her market stand. She pointed. Mally's mom stood looking at the empty lot where the market set up every summer weekend. She looked at Mally. Honey, Mrs. Fair told me last week that she had to close her stand. She's really getting too old to run it anymore. Mally turned, stared, and put her hands on her hips. But Mrs. Fur's stand can't close, she said. It's the only place in the neighborhood we can buy fresh, delicious tomatoes. Then she added to show she wasn't being selfish. Everyone needs fruit and vegetables for a healthy diet. After they got home, Mally headed out to her backyard swing to think. If only I could plant a garden, she thought, but our yard is way too small. Just then, she noticed her neighbor, Mr. Taylor, looking at his daffodils. Mally knew he was thinking about how he had planted those flowers with his wife. This was the first spring since his wife had died, and Mally saw the sadness on his face. Then she had an idea. Now, dear students, what do you think this idea is? Let's remember. Of course, we know it. But now let's start from the beginning. The author started the story with introducing the settings for the readers. What are the settings of a story? Settings are the place and the time of the story. What's the place? The place is Mally's neighborhood. And what's the time? On a bright Saturday morning. So it's in spring, Saturday morning, and the place is Mally's neighborhood. And he also started with introducing two characters, the main character in the story, which is um, Mally and her mom. Then he moved to introduce another important character in the story. Who is this character? This character is Mr. Taylor. So here we underlined it. And here, circle the words that help you determine the diet means and write its meanings. We know that diet means food we eat. And what's the food we eat here? We can circle them. The fruits, the vegetables, and healthy diet. So, diet means the food we eat. Now, the sequence. Sequence, as we said, is the order of events in the story. Now, what do you think? Who is the character introduced? We said Mr. Taylor, and we underlined it. And do you think Mally thinks about her problem after she sees Mr. Taylor or after? Before she sees Mr. Taylor or after? Of course, after. So we wrote after here. And now we go to the next page. Mally cleared her throat and Mr. Taylor looked up. Mally decided to walk over to the fence. Hi, Mr. Taylor, she said. He waved and turned away. Wait, Mally cried, taking a risk while she still felt brave. She rushed to gather her thoughts. Mr. Taylor, Mrs. Fur isn't doing her tomato stand anymore because she's getting old. So I'd like to grow tomatoes. I don't want to get in the way of your flowers, though. I mean, I really like tomatoes. Suddenly, Mr. Taylor smiled. Mally, I'm not sure what you are talking about, but you've made me smile. Reasons to smile have been scarce lately. What do you want to do? As Mr. Taylor listened, an idea came to him. I still need a place to plant my flowers, but there's room for tomatoes. How about I make you a loan? I'll let you use a plot of land in my yard. I'll help you. And when your garden starts to prosper, you can repay me with a few tomatoes. Mally and Mr. Taylor shook hands on this deal. But first, Mr. Taylor said, you'll have to make an investment by buying some tomato plants at the nursery. Mally thought, well, I have some savings from my allowance, and I was saving to buy a computer game. She paused. But I'd rather have tomatoes, so let's start right away. The next day, Mally bought all the tomato plants she could afford. Mr. Taylor taught Mally how to prepare the soil and place the plants. Finally, Mally placed stakes as supports in the ground to help hold the plants up. Mr. Taylor explained, once the tomatoes come, the heavy fruit makes the branches bend. Then all they could do was water, pull weeds, and wait. And now here, how can rereading the first three paragraphs help you understand and retell Melly's idea? We can say that Melly wants to grow tomatoes, but I'm not sure how that will work with flowers. I reread and see that Mr. Taylor will loan her a plot of land. Then I know that Mally will grow tomatoes next to the flowers in his yard. And now we underline three important events that retell important elements of the story. Here are the three main events. This is event one, event two, and this is event three. When the fruit ripened, there were more juicy red tomatoes than even Mally could have imagined. There's no way I can eat all these, she realized. On Saturday, Mally and Mr. Taylor carried several crates of ripe tomatoes to the market, and by the day's end, they had sold them all. Not only did I get back the money I invested, said Mally, but I also made a profit of $20. Mr. Taylor said, those are also your wages. You've earned that money. Now, Mally beamed and said, Mr. Taylor, maybe you could sell some of your flowers and we could run a market stand together. Mr. Taylor, picturing a garden of zinnias and marigolds, was already looking forward to next summer. Now, draw a box around what Mally says to Mr. Taylor in paragraph 3. Mally and Mr. Taylor plan to run a market stand together next summer. This is what happened at the end of the story. And here, when the fruit ripened, there were more juicy red tomatoes than even Mally could have imagined. There's no way I can eat all these, she realized. And we draw a box around what Mally said. This is what Mally said to Mr. Taylor. Now let's go to the vocabulary practice. Use the example sentences to talk with a partner. We have some examples here. Let's start with the word afford. Jill looked at the price tag to see if she could afford to buy the blouse. Name something you would like to be able to afford. I would like to be able to afford a new game, for example, new game or a toy or anything else. Now, loan. Lynn asked her mom for a loan of $5. When have you made a loan to someone? Just an example. I made a loan to my younger brother when he needed money to pay for a book. Now, the word profit. When have you made a profit? I made a profit when I sold cupcakes at a fair or baking sale or whatever. Prosper. With enough care, a garden can prosper. What other things help people to prosper? People who own restaurant, for example, can prosper when they have a lot of customers. Actually, not only restaurants, but also any business. When you have a lot of customers, your business will prosper. Now, the word risk. Firefighters take a great risk when they enter a burning building. In what other jobs do people take a risk? We can say the cops job when they try to rescue people from floods or from disasters. We go to the word savings. What would you do with some of your savings? I would spend some of my savings on buying a present for my mother's birthday, which is a good thing. Now, scarce. Water can become scarce during hot, dry weather. We can say that uh, another phrase for scarce is not enough or lack or not or so little. Now, the word wages. Sam earns wages for taking leaves every autumn. What is a synonym for wages? A synonym for wages is income, we can say. Now let's go to the sequence. Sequence is important in the story to help you first understand the story and second to know which event happened first or second or third or so on. So sequence is the order in which the plot events happen in a story. The sequence of events includes the most important events at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. Now, let's think of these three events that we read in the story and let's try to order them properly. Let's start with Mally sells the ripe tomatoes and makes a profit of $20. Did this happen at the beginning of the story? I don't think so. We go to the second. Molly learns that the tomato stand will not be at the summer market anymore. She sees her neighbor and gets an idea. I think this works as the first event. But let's check the last one. Molly make a deal with Mr. Taylor, buys tomato plants, and raises them in his garden. What do you think? Yes. So the first event was when Molly learns that the tomato stand will not be at the summer market. Second, when Molly makes a deal with Mr. Taylor. And the third, when Molly sells the ripe tomatoes and makes a profit of $20. Okay, now it's your turn to reread page 37 and discuss and retell why Molly decides to sell her tomatoes. Also, tell what Mr. Taylor's actions show about his relationship with Molly. Remember to use the reread strategy. We can say an example because we may have different answers. Molly realizes that she has grown a lot of tomatoes and can't eat all of them herself. So she decides to sell them and Mr. Taylor helps her sell them. This shows that he enjoys working with her. And now, as we said, the sequence of the story. Um, First of all, characters Mellie's mom, and Mr. Taylor. Those are the three main characters who appeared in the story. We can say that the in the story, two characters were mentioned, but they didn't appear. Remember them? First, Mrs. Fair, who used to have the stand to sell fresh tomatoes, and she got too old to run it, so she closed it. And who else? Mrs. Taylor, Mr. Taylor's wife, who passed away or who died. The settings, as we said, the place and the time was the place, Mally's neighborhood, and the time in spring or Saturday morning in spring. And at the beginning of the story, what happened? As we said, that Mally learns that tomato stand will not be at the summer market, and she sees her neighbor in his garden and has an idea. She talks to Mr. Taylor, who lets her use his land. And at the beginning of this, at the middle of the story, Mally buys tomato plants from the nursery, and Mr. Taylor teaches her how to plant and take care of them. And when the tomatoes ripen, there are there were lots of them, so Mally decides to sell them at the market. And at the end of the story, Mally makes a profit selling tomatoes, $20, as we said. She and Mr. Taylor think about selling Mr. Taylor's flowers and running a market stand together next summer. And now, to better understand the story elements. You remember this mountain that we talked about? Any story we read or any movie sometimes we see have these elements. Why? Because I'll give you an example. If I'm telling you a story without any problem, this is going to be so boring. For example, if you are talking about yourself, I woke up in the morning, I went out, I played with my friends, I came back home, I watched TV, I slept, then I woke up in the morning, I went somewhere. This is so boring, and the listeners will get bored of this, or the readers if you are talking about a story. So almost all stories or movies we watch have these elements. Let's talk about these elements in our story, a fresh idea. It's just like a mountain. Now we will see how is it a mountain. As we see, the story starts with a conflict or a problem to the main character in the story. What's Molly's problem at the beginning of the story? That Molly is sad because she cannot buy Mrs. Fair's tomatoes, which is a problem for her. Now, the rising actions, just like climbing a mountain, it becomes more and more difficult. So we can say that she wishes she could plant tomatoes. Then she's afraid of talking to Mr. Taylor. Of course, why? Because she knows he was still sad because he lost his wife recently and these things. Then, when she gathered her thoughts before talking to Mr. Taylor. And now the climax in any story is what? Is the most exciting moment in the movie or in the story or anything we watch or read. When Mally asked Mr. Taylor, she gathered herself and she rushed to him to the fence and she asked Mr. Taylor to plant tomatoes in his land. And now she she asked him for this and she waited. And now the following actions when things become easier for the character, for the main character in the story. As we said, that climbing a mountain is much more difficult than going down a mountain. So things become easier when Mr. Taylor smiled. So this was the first good sign, or the thing that um, made Mally relax and feel a little bit happy. And then when he agreed to give her a piece of his yard as a loan, which is another good thing for her, and then he taught her how to take care of her tomatoes. So as we said, things are becoming easier and easier for her until the resolution. What's the resolution? It's fixing the problem of the story. Now, let's compare at the beginning of the story, the conflict or the problem of the story, when Mali is sad because she cannot buy Mrs. Fair's tomatoes. But now, at the end of the story, Mali enjoyed the tomatoes she planted and earned profits of $20. This is everything in the story. It's a very easy story. We can easily understand it. I hope this was helpful for you. And goodbye, dear students.